Hi everybody, it's Jim from Sprague Woodturning. This week we're going to take a bunch of different branches and combine them with some emerald green tinted resin and some Bora Bora blue tinted resin for a very unique shallow bowl. Here I'm using a casting bucket that I made, but it has a tendency to leak, so that's why I put the plastic in there. And that is also a 1/4 inch piece of MDF or hardboard, whatever you want to call it. And my thought process here was to just put these branches in random and not try and make a pattern with them. Although maybe a pattern would have looked really cool, but the way the way it kind of goes for me is if I did try to do a pattern with it, there wouldn't be enough branches, and then I'd have to, start over again. So I didn't want these branches to float. I didn't want them to move around. So that's why I'm gluing them in place. And you see the plastic bucket material around the outside. That will keep the plastic from encroaching in on the casting, because you certainly don't want that ending up in your final casting, that's for sure. And it also allows the casting to come out of the bucket very easily. Thought that we would try something different. We haven't really done anything like this. This is going to be a small platter. And of course we've got sumac and apple and purple sand cherry. That's what the woods are. All right, let's get some resin mixed up. This week we're using Designer Epoxy's Artcast Epoxy, and if you've been following it along with the Peacock hollow form, I'm going to show how easy it is to actually get that color separation with a faster setting resin, which this is. Now I did end up mixing too much resin. Not to worry, it didn't get wasted. I put it into some other containers and got it ready for some other future projects as well. So I'm just putting in the Bora Bora blue and of course the green tinted pigment as well. It's starting to get cool here at night, so I find that the Artcast, of course, is a thicker epoxy because it's a 1-to-1. So what I did was I warmed up these jugs in the sink in my house and then brought them out and used them. So I found that the emerald green was too lime green looking for me. So I want to put a little bit of black in it just to darken it up. And it's pretty much the color that I was looking for. I think it's best that we actually move this into the pressure pot before we do any pouring. So let's do that. So here's my thinking. I could pour from each side, the two different colors, and have them meet in the center. You could actually almost kind of pour it in a ring. And again, a different color and a different color. That might look pretty cool. But I'm hoping that the branches are going to keep the resin from combining, because it's creating natural little dams, if you will. So I could just kind of pour it here and there and everywhere, which I think that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to make a ring pattern in it or anything like that. I think I'm just going to pour it in random spots until we use up all of our resin. This is probably going to float, but I want to make sure that I get this on here before I actually put the wane on there. Well, let's see how this goes. Not floating yet. All right, these branches should absorb some of that. I got a little bit left over. That's okay. I'll throw it in my cups and we'll make something with that at a later date. Well, here's our casting. You didn't miss much. It came right out because of the plastic bag. But the retainer ring that I had around the outside of it, of course, gave us some leftover resin pieces, so I'm sure we can probably find a use for these in an upcoming project. Yeah, forgot to turn the camera on. Sorry, people. Yeah, it must be Monday. Now I had this sitting up on a bucket inside of the pressure pot. That way it wouldn't be so deep down inside of it. It's hard to film down there. But it was sitting there a little crooked, so it's a little thicker on one side than it is on the other. That shouldn't be too big of a deal. So let's get our centers and get this mounted on the lathe. Don't know where I want to get it from here though. I might just grind this hardboard off of here, and I think that will give us a more truer round piece to work with to find centers. This is a belt cleaner from sandpaper.ca, and as you can see, it does a really good job cleaning up both the belt and the disc. So I highly recommend getting some of those if you're not using them. Really will extend your sandpaper. And all I'm trying to do here is just grind back that MDF piece that was sticking out, and then we'll be able to get a center and get this on the lathe. I do plan on putting a glue block on this, so I don't know, it was really hard to find out exactly where center was going to be. So after giving it some thought, I'm not going to melt this between centers. I'm just going to put a glue block on the bottom of this, and then we'll go from there. I don't know how this hardboard is going to hold up to the glue block and the amount of torque that's going to be on it. I'm a little worried about it delaminating from itself. So I'm going to grind this out and then make sure that our faceplate or our waste block is glued to the bottom of the platter, you know, the sticks and the resin, as opposed to the hardboard. Here I'm using a Kutzall sanding disc in order to grind this down to the resin and the branches. I should have probably used it on a non-slip surface, but you know, it was too far away. So here I'm getting ready to mount the glue block, and that's why I drilled the hole so that I can line it up with the little awl through the center, and then there you go. One thing about that MDF, does it ever throw off a lot of dust? And it's very aggressive, so you definitely need to wear some sort of self-powered respirator. The other thing about MDF is, and I've worked with it a little bit, but not a whole lot on the lathe, it certainly will dull your tools pretty quickly. And as far as that goes, when you're machining it, like I mean cutting it with some sort of a saw, sometimes you'll even see sparks coming off it. So it's a real tool killer. So just keep that in mind if you're going to do any work with it. I figured it to be the best option because I knew that it wasn't going to absorb a lot of resin. If I had used a piece of plywood, it certainly would have probably used a lot of resin, which is something that we certainly don't want, especially if you're using something like deep cast. I should also mention that we're using the Hercules here from Hunter Tool Systems. And again, just like for sandpaper.ca, designer epoxy, and Hunter Tool Systems, and of course Starbond, there is a link in the description to get 10% off or 15% off your next order. Just use code InlayGem, and the links in the description will take you right to those specific sites. So the goal here is to relieve all of the branches. I didn't get all of them really cut off perfectly flat. So there you could see that cherry one that wasn't really sitting all the way down. So need to cut this all the way back until we see all the branches completely coming through it. And at the same time, I want to cut in a foot so you can see there's a fairly large diameter foot on this piece because I want it to be very stable when it's sitting on the table. And yeah, I mean, it's just kind of whittling away till you get that all done. Then I can move to the front of the piece. Since this is the 70,000 subscriber giveaway bowl, I need to go over this again because it's happening almost every giveaway. I will never ask you for money for shipping. If you win the bowl, you win the bowl, and I will ship it worldwide. So that's, you know what, I don't know how many people these scammers have gotten, but if you do get contacted by these individuals, please forward that to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I can forward it to the authorities and hopefully you can catch these people. Along with that, Designer Epoxy is also going to be giving a 3-gallon kit away. So they will not ask you for shipping either. So please, if you get contacted by these people, please forward that information to me and hopefully we can catch these people. As you can see, this is a very dusty affair. Very hard to get shavings on everything that's end grain. You will see that I do actually get some shavings after I change the cutter on the Hercules here. But you know, this is all end grain and resin, and it's a very tough thing to cut cleanly, so you're not doing a ton of sanding. So sharp tools are absolutely a necessity here, or else you're going to be using a ton of sandpaper trying to grind this back. And if you've done any amount of sanding, you'll know that sanding end grain is no fun. So I don't know if the camera is picking this up or not, but there is tons of color separation here. And that is easy to achieve with a fast setting resin. But of course, with these peacock hollow forms that I've been trying to make, well, you know you're pouring 5-6 inches of resin and you can't use art cast for that because if you did, it would thermal crack and blow up. So that's why we have to use the deep cast, and that's why it's been, you know, the struggle that it's been to try and sort out this peacock hollow form. But I think I've got it figured out, and we're either going to see that next week or the week after. So as far as this piece is concerned, I really like it, really grooving it. You guys can't really see the outside edge here, but it looks really cool in some places where the resins have combined the different colors. So I was thinking that instead of just making like a plate, why don't we actually just cut in here a little ways, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch or so, and then same thing all the way down. The overall thickness would be that, and there'd just be a little lip on the end of this, and it can be used as a fruit display dish or, you know, whatever. I mean, it's very decorative. Certainly could get hung on the wall. Anyway, let's keep going on. We still got a few branches that we still need a relief, but when I cut this in, that'll be fine. Even there, that one there's got a little bit of resin on the very top of it, but the rest of them I think are okay. So I waited a little bit before I put the new cutter on. I knew that I essentially was using this as a roughing tool, and then as soon as I got down to kind of my finish thickness that I wanted, then I would swap out the cutter, and you know that way you get some really nice shavings prior to doing any sanding. Everything was cut and actually fairly clean except for the sumac branches. Sumac is quite soft and it has a really soft center. Like you can literally take your fingernail and drive it into it. So, you know, that of all the pieces, and every time I stop the lathe, and you can see the sumac branches are kind of on the greener side. You can definitely tell that there's more tear out in them than there is in the other branches. Apple is actually fairly hardwood, and it cuts quite cleanly, and so does the cherry. And speaking of that cherry, I know initially I said purple sand cherry, but I don't think that it is. I think that it came from a choke cherry tree that I have in my backyard here. I do actually have a purple sand cherry that we dug up that had died, and we're going to use that in the future on the channel as well. It tends to have a darker, richer looking color. So it'll be interesting when we do something with that. I think it may be a hollow form of some sort, a bunch of sticks put together, and should look pretty spectacular actually. As for a shallow bowl here, it does slightly taper into the center from the outside ring, but for the most part, it's pretty flat, but there is a slight taper. So here I'm just taking up some finishing cuts. Again, measuring, also important. You definitely don't want to go through the side of anything. And there's the new cutter. So now you will see the shavings that I'm looking for. And that's the difference between a new cutter and an old cutter. This one was able to cut those sumac branches really clean. There's the first pass, and and it doesn't really matter if you go straight onto the piece or on the 45 with a new cutter. If I am straight onto the piece, I like to tilt the back of the handle up, and that way I avoid any catches. And but when the cutter is on the side like it is there, it's pretty rare that you'll get any catches. Sometimes you will get some kickback from it, like you would like a normal gouge, and you can almost treat this thing like a gouge. And I know I've said that in the past. On the outer ring, I wanted to get past those center pieces of the sumac because, or the pith that's in the sumac, because it would have really not been good after it was sanded. There I was just measuring up the thickness between 3/8 and a half inches, what I was going for on this piece. I will say that the branches, if you are going to try and do something like this, it is very, very important to make sure that the branches are as dry as they possibly can. So everything was dried down to 5% or less before it was put into this project. If you try to use branches that do not have a low moisture content like that, chances are they are going to shrink and they're going to fall out of your work. So make sure that they're bone dry before you use them. Along with that, you may have noticed that the cherry branches still had the bark on them. And believe me, I tried to get that bark off and it is on there. It is welded onto there. So, I figured that it was probably best to just leave it alone. If you look when the piece stops, the pieces that have the green penetration of the resin in them, those are the cherry branches. And so, I'm pretty confident that this is not going to come out of there at any time because it's very, very tough. There's some nice shavings coming off it right there. Some people may also wonder if these branches have been stabilized with stabilizing resin, and they have not been. And one of the reasons for that is because if you stabilize these branches with stabilizing resin, they then you can really no longer call this food safe or safe for food contact. So that's another reason. Well, that's probably the main reason why I didn't use any stabilized branches. But with that said, if you're worried about these wooden pieces shrinking and falling out of your work, then you probably should go ahead and stabilize branches like this. So anyway, we're just working here, just trying to get a nice flat surface or, no lumps and bumps in it before we move on to sanding. And there you go. These are the 3.5-inch dipple discs from sandpaper.ca. And I really like these, and a good example of them is right there to the left. That little wing or those little dimples wrap around the sanding pad, and you can get in there and sand those edges up against the flat surface where it meets the vertical surface, and it works absolutely fantastic. Totally love these, and they also come in 2.5-inch sizes as well if you prefer smaller discs. For the new people, this is Triple E buffing compound from the Be All buffing system. This is the second last thing that I do before we do any finish, and that will take any fine scratches out of the resin prior to the finish going on. And here's the last step, denatured alcohol to clean away any of that residue, because you don't want that in your finish. As I like to say, this is the best part. First coat of finish, We're going to be using the medium sheen Waterlux again, original VOC. Since this is a giveaway bowl, I didn't want to use the high gloss Waterlux. I know that it's not for everybody. Even still, the medium sheen stuff is still pretty high gloss as well. Well, I think that it's pretty darn cool. These areas right here where you've got the total green and blue mix, are pretty cool. And the different type of branches, you know, putting them in there random, I think is the way to do this. You try to make things even and I don't know, it just never seems to really work out. There's the sides. Again, lots of color separation, and that's just because of the faster setting resin. See you tomorrow for the second coat. She's a beauty. So it is the next day, and before I put the next coat of finish on, thought that I would show. So, you know, these are obviously all in grain, so I mean they're going to absorb a lot of finish. So very skeptical that we'll get this in 2 coats. It's more likely to be 3, but I thought that I would show the surface of the finished piece before putting on the next coat. And if you're wondering, it is very translucent. I will, here, let me get a light. So yeah, I mean, that kind of shows you how translucent it is. This is that orb light. Try and don't have enough hands. All right, let's put our next coat of finish on. Just like the first coat of finish, triply buff and compound, then cleaned up with denatured alcohol, and that's the way that I do it between every coat of finish that I put on. Back again with the Waterlux Original VOC Medium Sheen. There it is after its second coat. I don't know if it's much different than it was when the first. It's very cool. I'll be doing more of these in the future for sure. That there where it's blended, it's really neat. All right, well, if there's a third coat, I will do it the same, and we'll see you when we're doing the bottom. So this piece did in fact take 3 coats. I probably could have got away with 2, but 3 was probably best. So here I'm just parting the piece off with a 3/16" parting tool from Crown, and then just finishing the rest of it with the handsaw. And of course we're going to use the vacuum chuck. Love my vacuum chuck. And I think it only took me 3 tries to actually get it centered good enough that we could work on it. So I want to get rid of any of this hot melt glue that's on the bottom. It tends to clog up the cutter on the Hercules, so I'll use the gouge to get rid of that. And as you can see, there's a Hercules coming in, giving you some really nice shavings. And for the non-turners and people that really don't understand grain structure, something that's end grain, so if you took a tree and cut it in half and you look down on top of the stump, that is end grain. The whole thing would be end grain. If you look at the side of a tree or a log laying on the ground, that's side grain. And side grain will cut nicer and easier than end grain, because essentially with end grain, you're cutting off a densely packed thing that's basically looks like a bunch of straws. So it's hard to cut clean, where the side grain is typically not an issue with that. I haven't mentioned it, but this piece was sanded from 60 to 800. So let's pick a winner of this beautiful bowl. And of course, a winner for the 3-gallon kit of epoxy from Designer Epoxy. So what you're looking at are the 8 names that the random YouTube comment picker has kicked out. These 4 names will be entered for the epoxy draw. And these 4 names will be entered for the bowl draw. So we'll put them in separately and we'll pick a name for each one. Let's do that. All right, so these are the names for the epoxy giveaway. Our bowl is a little too shallow for that, so I'll use this piece of catalpa. It's got a little soapstone inlay in it, so in there you go. And the winner of the epoxy is Perry County Whitetails. Congratulations, you are the winner of the epoxy giveaway. Please send your details to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I will forward that to Designer Epoxy and we'll get that kit mailed out to you. When you do that, please tell me what kind of epoxy you want. Deep cast, Pro Series, or Art Cast. So congratulations. So the next one is going to be for the bowl. So here are the 4 names for the bowl. And the winner of the 70,000 subscriber giveaway bowl is Angie Hall. You are the winner of the 70,000 subscriber giveaway bowl. Congratulations, and same for you. Please send your details to spraguewoodturning@gmail.com and I will get your bowl mailed out to you. Congratulations. And if you're curious, she commented on the Peacock Hollow Form and Perry County Whitetails. They commented on Peacock Hollow Form as well. So congratulations. You never know when it's going to be your turn. So this giveaway from Designer Epoxy is going to keep on going. So he said every 10,000 subscribers he's going to give away another kit. So please keep commenting Designer Epoxy. And of course, in order to be entered for the bowl draw, all you got to do is comment down below. All right, so let's talk about the bowl. So here's our bowl, and you know, it is 11 inches across and 1.5 inches tall. Very neat. Tons of color separation, and you know what? That can be achieved with a fast setting resin. And I know that a lot of people have been commenting on previous videos about the Peacock Hollow Form and need to use a faster setting resin. I totally get that, but you can't use those fast setting resins in a deep pour, so you're just gonna, thing's just gonna blow apart. So that's why I haven't used the Art Cast. If you're curious for those kinds of, it's just not suitable for that, or it's not designed for that. So that's why we got to use the deep cast. Really like the edge separation. I will again put up some rotating video at the end of this piece. But tons and tons of color separation. Very, very cool. Here is the very back side. I know that it's very busy and hard to see, but there is only one coat on here. I think it probably only take another coat and it'll probably be done. The very difficult to sign on because there's so many pieces of wood and resin, and so I thought about engraving it. I thought about signing on one branch here and then moving to another branch, and then it just kind of, I don't know, it's just, so it's around the edge, and of course I think that it looks better that way. Anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this week's project. I think it's very cool, and I definitely want to do more of these in the future, especially with different branches. You know, I mean, the sky's the limit. Really, it truly is. There is a bit of a texture to it. So these little hearts for the sumac are really, really soft. So yeah, you know, you can feel it when you go around, but you know, there's really no way around it. But I really like the look of sumac. It's a very unique color that you typically don't see, and that's sumac, if you're curious, that you just don't see normally in nature, not in Canada anyway. And sumac is very much a weed. I've got it here on the property. When we first built this house, I seen one pop up and I didn't get rid of it. because they do really spread really fast. And anyway, some people like the look of them. I don't really mind the look of them, but I know that if you leave them alone, they'll take over a huge area. So yeah, 3 coats of finish, and I think this is a very cool project, and hopefully the winner likes it too. All right, well, that's it. Next week we're going to do something that I've never done before, and that seems to be the common theme on this channel, and it involves 10 liters of resin or more, because it's not done yet. So please come on back from that. All right, well, that's it. Take care, stay safe, don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. We'll see you next week.